Hi everyone, this time I want to talk about FIA Championships on GT Sport, how they work and what you need to do to get more points. FIA Championships are run directly by Poliphony and they usually last about a month or a month and a half on average. You can get to those ones by going to the sports section of GT Sport. Usually when there's a season going, you can find those two sections on the center and on the right. There are two types of championships, the Manufacturers Series and the Nations Cup. The difference between those two are mainly because of the type of the race that you can get into. Usually on FIA races you have races of different category, but mainly you are free to choose which vehicle you want to run for a specific race. Whereas for the Manufacturer Series instead, you are forced to use a car from a particular manufacturer that you choose at the beginning of the season, or from the beginning of various seasons ago. And that's because Poliphony restricts the amount of changes of manufacturer you could do all throughout the season. So it might happen that you might be sticked for a particular manufacturer for a variety of seasons. It happened to me a while ago that I chose the Alfa Romeo, and I got stick to the Alfa Romeo for various seasons until the very last one. This one was my first one where I choose different manufacturer, but because Poliphony let me at last. This is not due to a specific time scale, but it's Poliphony that every time decides whether or not it could restrict you or it could allow you to choose a different manufacturer on the end of the season. Another thing to say about the Manufacturer Series is that because of that you are pretty much restricted to Group 3 and Group 4 races. There are no one makes, or there are no N300 or anything like that, like it is on the Nations Cup. That's why the Nations Cup are usually more. There's a little bit more variety in terms of vehicles that you could choose, but on the same time, there are so many OP cars for each category that pretty much becomes one make nonetheless. Each championship consists in several races that they usually run on Wednesdays and on Saturdays, and for each one of those races you have several attempts that you can do. In this case it's only 3, but they usually are more than 5, and they run for hourly, so 1 per each hour. In this case is 1 every 2 hours, but is okay because you have the opportunity to run both championship because they alternate each other. Like for example in this case there's at 6 o'clock, and then there's the Nations Cup, for example, there's a race at 7 o'clock. So what you could do, you can alternate between the Nations Cup and the Manufacturer Series if you really want to compete in both those ones. It's important though to say that even though you could make every single attempt of a specific race, that doesn't mean that your points are adding up each time. Only the last attempt that you do in a specific race is the one that counts. So in this case, if you do the race at 5 p.m. and you think, okay, probably the result I didn't particularly like, what you could do is to attend another race at 7 o'clock and try to get an higher score. It's needless to say that if you achieve a lower score at the 7 o'clock, that means that that point is the point that sticks. So you need to try to risk the value you risk versus the reward that you might get. On each season, Poliphony decides how many races count for the score. So if you can read at the middle of this screen, you might also read that only the top 4 out of 10 races count. This means that, for example, in this case, what I did is to attend 6 races, but if you can see, some of those points are grayed out. This means that those points were ignored because I made higher score in other races. So this is a way to incentivize people to compete for those races, even though they can't attend all the single races. Also important to notice that this time is 4 races, but that doesn't mean that it's always 4, because the number of races can be different from season to season. Also, the number of races that are picked up to get the score, to get the final score, are different for each season. The points that you might score in each attempt depend, apart from your final position in the race, from your driver rating and from your safety rating. Needless to say, the higher your driver rating and safety rating, the higher your score. What Poliphony does not tell you is that there's a score behind that specific letter, and 2 people with driver rating B might end up having a completely different score. Because there's people, of course, that are closer to the driver rating A and people that are closer to the driver rating C instead. So it's not only just a matter of the letter itself, but how well you're doing within that letter of driver rating and safety rating as well. You might be able to find your exact level and all the score that comes behind the scene of those letters by going to the Kudos Prime website and enter your PSN nickname, and it will show you not only your current score, but how well you've done all throughout the life cycle of the game. So you might see a chart of all your history, how well you've done so far in GT Sport. I'm currently a driver with driver rating A, but if you see on the top right hand of the screen, you might be able to see that I actually marked as a S driver. Now, that S driver is not really a letter that is related to how good I am, but is a mark of something that I've achieved in the last few seasons in the manufacturer series. That's because the letter S doesn't really depend on how well you've done so far all throughout the daily races, and is not a real driver rating, but is a mark of something that you achieved in the earlier season, and it's a way to get to specific races that I will explain you later. In order to have the driver rating S, what you need to do is to be in the top 200 people within your region, so in my case within Europe, in both the manufacturer or the Nations Cup, or in the manufacturer series you need to be the top 10, within the top 10 of your manufacturer of choice, always in your regional ranking, so Europe. Or in the Nations Cup you need to be within your within the 10th position in your country, for your country, in of course your region. This of course needs to be maintained, so if you can't score, if I can't, now I currently have the S driver rating, but if I couldn't achieve the parameters to be an S ranked driver on this season, I will lose that letter and I will come back to my normal A. Having driver rating S doesn't really mean that you get more points within the circuit races, but what allows you to do is to having an invitation for one of those races, which is the top 16 superstars. Those are specific races that are running usually by the end of the season, and basically they are for the very fastest drivers. Those are chosen by, of course, you have to have this driver rating S. You need to be also with safety rating S, and you need to be within the first 2 of your manufacturer or from your nations that has the driver rating S. So if you are within the first 2 people with the driver rating S for your manufacturer or for your nations, for the Nations Cup, you will be able to join this race. This is of course meant for the very fastest drivers that need to have as many points as possible, and they need to compete within each other to get the last few points to reach the very top of the standings. But to really understand how important are these races and how many points are at stake, just bear in mind that you have 1,000 basic points. This means that by the mere fact that you join in this race, you have 1,000 points that, for example, I have driver rating A and never achieved 1,000 points so far in the season. I could have done if I won a race, but I didn't. So that's why I didn't achieve the 1,000 point, and that's only for joining this race. You have 1,000 points plus you need to compete against the very fastest drivers in the game, so this means that a lot of points are at stake by default. But not only that, but also the points are multiplied by 1.2. This means that you have 20% more points than you will normally have. And that, believe, covers all. Please check out the rest of my channel, where I got a serious old tutorial going on about GT Sport, but they're usually not just geared toward GT Sport, they can be applied on all racing games. Hope you guys enjoyed. Until the next time, bye.